The Committee of Adjustment is a body appointed by City Council to hear applications for relief from the city's zoning bylaws and also to hear applications to sever property within the city in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. Procedure followed by this committee is that we will first hear from the applicant. We will then invite those who wish to ask any questions or voice their objections to the application to come forward. The committee will consider all the information presented and will then render its decision. If you wish to be notified of the decision of the Committee of Adjustment in respect to this application, you must submit a written request before the Committee of Adjustment makes a decision. Requests are to be made to the Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Jeff Bannon in the Building and Planning Department, jbannon@stratford.ca. This will also entitle you to be advised of a possible local planning appeal tribunal hearing. Even if you are the successful party, you should request a copy of the decision, since the Committee of Adjustment decision may be appealed to the local planning appeal tribunal by the applicant or another member of the public. Any decision reached by this committee is not final and binding until after the appeal period has expired. If you wish to appeal the committee's decision to the local planning appeal tribunal, you may do so within that appeal period. By completing the request of decision from Mr. J. Bannon at stratford.ca, persons other than the applicant or his or her agent who wish copies of the decision will have decisions sent to you. Do any members of the committee have a declaration of pecuniary interest with any application?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
It's Charlene.
Yes.
And I have a conflict with, just a moment here. Consent application B08-20.
08-20, so noted. And for those listening in or viewing us on video, etc., just to let you know the members of the committee, we have Charlene Gordon, there's Dave Hunt, Roger Black, Jerry Reynolds, and myself, Kevin Silver, is the chair. I'll then ask Mr. Bannon to present the first application.
First application is A16-20. The property is 350 Olone Avenue. It's located on the west side of Olone Avenue between Thomas Street and Daneker Road. The applicant is asking to reduce the rear yard setback from 7.5 meters to 7.15 meters for the municipally addressed units that are 23 through to 26. Just as a quick history, they did receive site plan approval in 2018. They received draft plan of condominium approval in 2019. And they also have approval for 2 minor variances. One in August of 2019, which was to define a lot as encompassing the entirety of the lands that are zoned R4 bracket 2-7. And then again in August 2020, they received a minor variance to increase the rear yard encroachment for a deck and the stairs. So in this case, they're looking for a rear yard setback to the dwelling, and no public input was received. In our opinion, that the application meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and we just have the one condition that we're suggesting be included with any approval.
Okay, is there anyone to speak to this application?
Just give me one quick moment here and we'll get Megan unmuted.
Thank you.
Megan, can you hear us?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Excellent.
You heard what Jeff had to say, so anything else that you wish to fill in?
No, just that we had a chance to review the report and we agree with the recommendation. So I'm here and happy to answer questions if you have any.
Okay, do any of the members of the committee have questions of the applicant? Hearing none, is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this application? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So I'll make a motion Chair, that we approve the minor variance with the condition 1, that the plans submitted with the building permit are in keeping with the concept plan submitted with the minor variance application to the satisfaction of the manager of planning, and reason is being it is good use of the land.
Okay, is there a seconder?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, that motion is approved. Next application, Mr. Bannon.
The next application will be one of Caroline Baker's applications, so I'll let her speak to that.
Thank you, Jeff. I'll move forward with the next application before the committee, which is A17-20. And this relates to a minor variance for 201 Queen Street, located on the east side of Queen Street between Brunswick Street and Duro Street. The applicants have applied for a variance to permit an existing deck to be reconstructed in the same location, but an increased encroachment into the interior side yard of 0.02 meters. We have received public input from the neighboring property owners on Queen Street at 203 Queen Street and the other neighboring property owners on Brunswick Street. The owners of 203 Queen Street, which is located immediately to the south of the subject property, have indicated as of about an hour ago that they have no formal objection to the variance application, but do note they are in discussions regarding the legal boundary between the two properties. Planning staff have reviewed the variance and the public input received and have recommended that the variance application be approved and meets the 4 tests of minor variance. I would note that with the property line under review or discussion between the two property owners, however that results, they're in discussions of about 0.42 meters is the land in discussion over who has ownership of it. If the adjacent property owner were successful with their claim on the land and the variance were approved, it would mean that the deck would just, it would get a little bit smaller by the 0.42 meters. That summarizes the report, but I do understand the applicant is on the call and may be able to provide some additional information.
Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this application?
We do have Gregory Rose, and we'll unmute him so that he can speak.
Okay, Gregory, can you hear us now?
Hello, am I being heard?
Yes, but there's a lot of echo in there.
What about now?
No, that's better. There's still some echo, but go ahead.
Oh, hello. So members of the committee, I'd just like to address you very briefly here. I'd like to thank you for considering our application for minor variance. I'd also like to thank your staff for the recommendations that they've made. Just this morning, I was informed by our lawyer that Steve and Anne Marie Fulton of 203 Queen Street have withdrawn any objections to our application for minor variance. And currently, our parties are working towards a resolution. However, we maintain that this dispute is not legitimate due to a myriad of inconsistent facts.
Excuse me, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second, Gregory, because whatever discussion there is in terms of the legal side of it has no bearing in terms of what the variance is that's applied for.
Of course, of course.
So we can just focus on points to do with the variance.
No, absolutely. But ideally, we'd like the variance approved today so we can actually move forward with the reconstruction of the very modest deck. However, I understand that this dispute may delay the committee's ability to rule on the variance at this time. And if that's the case, then I respectfully ask that the committee decide to defer their decision until this issue can be resolved fully. Thank you very much for your time. That's everything I have to say.
Okay, just hold on for a minute. Point of clarification, Mr. Bannon. further to the question that was just raised, and if we approve the minor variance, if it does go through, does the legal aspect to it, what bearing is there?
Again, I'll defer this to Ms. Baker, and she can respond to that question.
Thank you. So if the variance were approved today, then the applicant could go ahead and build the encroachment of 0.2 meters into the side yard. So the deck would then be 1.3 meters from the surveyed property line. The applicant has submitted a legal survey by a surveyor showing the property line. Should the variance be approved and the applicant, I don't want to say loses, but should there be a loss of land as a result of this claim by the neighboring property owner of 0.42 meters, it would essentially mean that his deck for that small section in the backyard would be about 0.95 or 1 meter from property line. This was considered as part of planning staff's report in assessing the 4 tests of variance, because a 1 meter side yard and setback to a deck would have been permitted if the house was 1 story, and the deck is attached to a portion of the existing structure that is 1 story. And so should the variance be approved and the land is then subsequently lost, the deck would be, as I said, approximately 1 meter from the side lot line in this particular location. And given the recommendations of the planning report limiting the height of the deck, so you'll see in the planning report, we have included a limit to 0.63 meters in height and a privacy screen for the deck, that it was felt that matters related to privacy and overlook inherent in the official plan policies and zoning bylaw amendment regulations were satisfied.
Okay. Any members of the committee have questions of the applicant or the planner?
Roger Blunt, I have a question. My concern is, how can we rule on a variance when we don't know exactly where the boundary line is? And if the fence stays, then that where the disputed boundary is, my question would be, once we pass the minor variance, does the deck become larger if the fence is removed?
Carolyn, do you want to respond to that?
Through the chair. So I guess maybe I'll just provide a little bit of clarification on what the neighbors have claimed. So there's actually no formal adverse possession claim regarding the land. So the applicant has, I actually understand, 2 legal surveys showing legal property line, which does show the fence encroaching into their property. The adjacent property owners have not actually filed any legal paperwork to start the process of adverse possession. They've been having conversations between the 2 property owners. So that currently doesn't have any legal status in terms of an adverse possession claim. It's a discussion right now. If the variance is approved today with the deck encroaching an additional 0.2 meters and the fence stays, the distance between the existing fence encroaching and the new deck being enlarged would be about 1 meter. If the fence was removed and the property line was maintained to be as shown on the survey, so if the fence was moved back to the surveyed property line, the deck would be the 1.3 meters from the property line as requested through the variance.
Yeah, further clarification, Mr. Black?
The question is, I would like to, I don't know whether the people from 203 are going to speak to this or not today.
Through the chair, they have indicated they're not going to speak. They wrote an email from their lawyer about an hour ago, which has been sent to the clerk for part of the record, that they have no objection to the minor variance and will not be speaking, but they will continue to be having dialogue about the ownership of what I would call the disputed 0.42 meters of land.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any of the other members of the committee have questions? Yes, Jerry, go ahead. Unmute yourself, Jerry. You need to unmute. Unmute.
I actually thought it did that. The little red thing didn't go. So my question here, being the new boy on the block, is I'm understanding that this dispute is somewhat between a part of the fencing which we have no control over. Is that correct?
Ms. Baker, do you want to answer that?
Sure, through the chair, correct. The claim of the land and location of the fence would be outside the purview of the Committee of Adjustment.
Okay, and my next question is, again, so there is dialogue, or there is paperwork in the works that 203 definitely has no objections, and they're gonna move on with the part that we have nothing to do with. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, we have written correspondence from their solicitor, Sharon Bardwell, that they have no objection to the variance, and they're not going to be speaking today, but they maintain that they still have concerns related to the fence and whose property ultimately it belongs to at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you.
Any of the other committee members have any questions? Is there anyone else to speak to this application? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I will move the recommendation variance to prevent a deck with the maximum height of 0.063 meters with a privacy screen to encroach into the required rear yard setback of 5 meters, whereas the bylaw permits a maximum encroachment of 2.5 meters. And two, to permit a deck with a maximum height of 0.03 meters with a privacy screen to encroach into the required side yard setback of 0.2 meters. So I would be recommending variance number 2. Okay, not number 1. And that the planning staff have no objection to this application, and that the owner submits and obtains the necessary building permit for the proposed deck. So my recommendations is to permit the deck with the maximum height of privacy screen and to encroach into the required side yard setback of 0.02 meters.
Okay.
So in essence, the
Ms.
deck will,
Ms. Baker, can you just clarify? So point of clarification, Ms. Baker.
Yeah.
1 and 2, because basically they're two separate pieces, are they not? One deals with the rear yard and the other with the side yard?
Correct. Through the chair, there are 2 variances. One is to encroach
Oh,
into
okay.
the required rear yard, and one is to encroach into the required side yard.
Okay, well, then I will recommend 1 and 2. I was under the impression that 1 was for the side yard also, but 2 is for the side yard, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
then I'll
So
make that motion.
Your motion is to approve the recommendation of 1 and 2, and then the condition number 1, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And reason for the applicant or for the approval?
Good use of the land.
Yep. Is there a seconder to that?
I can second that.
Okay. Any further discussion?
One quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm assuming that there's no issue with, I'm assuming Brunswick Street, that the setback goes onto the rear yard?
Baker.
I apologize, the last word cut out there. Sorry, do you mind repeating?
The variance requested, item number 1, the required encroachment onto the rear yard. I'm assuming that's onto the Brunswick Street property, and there's no issue with the Brunswick resident?
Through the chair, that's correct. The resident did call and ask some questions and did not raise any concerns or objections.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no further questions, I'll call the motion. Anybody opposed? That is approved. Okay, next application.
Okay, sorry, I'm just scrolling down to the next report. Bear with me here.
Fine. Mhm.
So the next application is A18-20. The location of the property is at 56 Church Street on the west side of Church Street between St. Patrick Street and St. Andrew Street. This is a minor variance application. There are 2 variances requested to accommodate a proposed 2-story building addition on the north side of the existing single detached dwelling. The first variance is to permit a reduction in the side yard on the northern property line to 1 meter, where 1.5 meters is required for a 2-story building. And as a result of that variance, they're also seeking a variance to the minimum required aggregate side yard width to 2.7 meters, where 3 meters is required. In terms of public input, we did receive 1 email from the church to the north indicating support of the application. No other public input was received. Planning staff are recommending approval of the variance in that it meets the 4 test of variance. If you've been along this section of Church Street, there is certainly a grade fall traveling north to south. And if you look at the pictures attached in the planning staff report, the 2nd story of the proposed building addition would actually align with the 1st story of the adjacent residential building, where you normally see a 1 meter setback for 1st story windows. We did also have a chance to review the building elevations submitted on behalf of the applicant, and did note that there is only 1 window proposed on the northern building elevation, and we're satisfied that concerns related to privacy and overlook were addressed. So we are recommending approval subject to the conditions set out in the planning report, that the building permit drawings generally be in keeping with the concept plan and building elevations submitted as part of this application. And I do understand the applicant's agent, I believe, is also on the call.
Okay, does the applicant's agent wish to speak? Rob, are you on the call? Rob Ritz?
I'm here.
You wish to speak?
This isn't Rob Ritt.
Okay, sorry. I was going by what was on the.
I'm Tim Forster. I'm the owner.
Okay, perfect. And I'll let you speak then, or add anything to what Ms. Baker has indicated.
Actually, all we really truly have to say is we're excited to be coming to Stratford. And we hope that you approve the minor variance, in the sense is that it really truly is needed to make the new addition work properly.
Okay. Any members of the committee have questions of the applicant? Hearing none, is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this application?
Kevin, Robert Ritz here.
Yes, Robert.
I'm the agent for Tim, and we did submit a street elevation. I believe Carolyn was referring to that, where we actually went out to the site, took grades, and measured where the window locations were on the existing manse, and compared to where our proposed sill will be on our addition. And our 2nd floor window sill is slightly lower than the 1st floor window sill of the manse. The purpose of the law is that you don't have a 2nd story looking down into a rear yard. Here we're looking, or a side yard. Here we're looking right across in, which is permitted under the zoning bylaw with 1 meter setback. And that's why we applied for this variance.
Okay, members of the committee have any questions of the applicant or his agent? Anyone else to speak to this application? Hearing none, entertain a motion.
I can make that motion, Kevin.
Okay,
I would approve I would recommend approval of the variances requested with inclusion of the condition as listed in the report. And public input was considered. And the variance requested is minor in nature.
Yeah, actually, public input was received because the church did put through a notice on this.
Yes, that's what I said. Public input was considered.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. All right, and sorry, what was the reason for the approval?
I'll second it.
It's minor in nature.
Okay. Roger, second. Any further discussion on this application? Hearing none. Is there anyone opposed to the approval? That is passed. Thank you.
Yay! Oh,
That's okay.
sorry,
Next
I better
application.
move myself.
Next application. Carolyn, another one?
The next, to you, Chair, the next application is tied to two consent applications. There's a variance and two consent to the same property. Would you like to hear them together?
Is there a motion to hear both together, the consent and the
I'll
variance?
move that we hear the three together.
Okay, seconder?
I'll second that.
Barry, second. Anybody opposed? Okay, we'll hear all three of them together. Thank you.
Thank you. The three applications are A15-20, B05-20, and B06-20, and they relate to property at 3211 Vivian Line 37. It's located on the south side of Vivian Line between Mornington Street and Romeo Street North. The owners have applied to create two new residential lots that would each contain a single detached dwelling. The retained lot would continue to include the existing single detached dwelling that is on the property. The concurrent minor variance application relates to just one consent application, being B05-20. And just for ease of reference, because we're digital, that would be the proposed severed lot on the west side of the existing house, which would be closer to Mornington. The reduction is requesting that the minimum lot depth be reduced from 30 meters to 27.5 meters. And the reasoning for the reduced lot frontage is to address the floodplain lands that are on the site. So the proposed rear boundary of the new residential lot generally aligns with the boundary of the floodplain lands regulated by the Conservation Authority. In terms of public input, we did receive one call from a neighboring property owner to the east at 400 Romeo Street, which is the apartment building at the corner of Romeo and Vivian Line. Just questions about the size of the lots proposed, and no objection or concerns were stated through that correspondence. The planning staff in their review are recommending approval of all three applications, subject to a number of conditions for the two consent applications. The owners have received a no objection letter and had substantial dialogue with the Conservation Authority about the proposed development, the proposed boundary, and again, the Conservation Authority has issued no objection. Subject to the inclusion of the conditions, planning staff are recommending support of all three applications.
Okay, is there anyone else to speak to this application?
Yeah, I am. I'm in a meeting right now. Okay, thanks.
Sorry.
As agent, I'd like to speak. It's Doug Rayon from MTE.
Yes, go ahead, Doug.
One other factor in the reduced lot depth is the requirement of a 5-meter road widening that has been requested as well.
Okay. Does that have any effect on from the planner?
Through the chair, that was noted and shown on MTE's submission for their severance sketch and has been taken into consideration through the report and the recommendations.
Anything else to add in terms of from the agent?
That would be it for me, unless
Okay,
there are any questions.
Any of the committee members have questions for the applicant? Hearing none. Is there anyone else to speak to this application? And hearing none, I'll entertain a motion on A1520, B0520, and B0620.
So moved, Kevin.
Okay, and reason, David?
Public input was considered, and it's appropriate for the development of the property.
Okay. Seconder?
I can second that.
All right, Charlene. Any further discussion? Any questions? Hearing none. Anybody opposed to the application? That is passed and approved. Thank you. Okay, next one was consent application again, Ms. Baker.
Application is, oh, sorry. Oh, I thought that was me. It's not me. The 0720, this is a consent application for 4272 line 34, being Highway 8 on the north side of the road between Alone and the city limits. The applicant has applied for a consent application, and this may be familiar to the Committee of Adjustment. They had received Committee of Adjustment provisional consent approval September 12th, 2018 for the exact same consent to essentially sever the surplus farmhouse that fronts onto the highway. The approval did lapse, so they are reapplying. A few items of note since they last brought this application forward. The conditions are largely the same recommended by planning staff. However, we were able to move the condition related to zoning. In the interim period between 2018 and 2020, the applicants did apply for the required zone change for the severed farmhouse and the retained agricultural property. So they are in the correct zoning, recognizing the proposed use, lot frontages, and lot areas. There was no public input received, and subject to the conditions outlined in the report, planning staff are recommending approval.
Okay, is there anyone else to speak to this application?
Again, as agent.
Yes.
Yeah, our clients have just gotten too busy with their farm businesses to move forward to sell this residence, and now they have a purchaser lined up, I believe, and they want to continue, and that's why it lapsed, and that's why they're reapplying now.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? Hearing none. Is there anyone else to speak to this application? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
To approve the recommendations as listed with the conditions that are included. And the rationale, moment here. The use of the land in the application conforms to the official plan. Public input was considered.
All right. Is there a seconder to that?
I'll second that.
Jerry beat you to it. I saw his hand before I heard your voice. All right, so seconded by Jerry Reynolds. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed to the approval? Hearing none, this is passed. Okay, and we have one more consent application, and we've noted that Charlene has declared a conflict on this one, so she will step aside. Ms. Baker?
The last application is B0820 for lands known loosely as 440 Ontario Street, on the north side of Ontario Street between Parkview Drive and Queen Street. This is a consent application to re-establish two former lots on Ontario Street. My understanding through the applicant's submission, they had owned one property for 40 Ontario Street and had purchased the adjacent property at 436 Ontario Street. And by error, the two properties were put in the same legal ownership name, which means that they do merge on title. When they went to go sell the property, this was identified as an issue, and they've come forward with the severance application to essentially reestablish the former lot lines. We have not received any outside public input. There has been discussions with the applicant about the conditions imposed. Planning staff is recommending approval of the consent application subject to the conditions outlined in the report. I would note, based on late day discussions between the applicant and the city solicitor, I have sent suggested modification to condition 7. And I have provided that to Jeff Bannon. I can read it out, but I have provided it in written format. The essence of the change, condition 7, is the requirement for a reference plan in order to perfect the consent application should it be approved by the committee. It was noted by the applicant's surveyor that in fact both the severed and retained have separate pins because they were former lots that had merged inadvertently on title. We have had discussions with their surveyor, their solicitor, and the land registry office about what exactly would be required. And given that it could not be resolved right before the meeting at the advice of the city solicitor, we've read the condition to be that they either have to submit a reference plan or they have to get an exemption from a reference plan, which is a form available at the land registry office, or they have to provide such documentation to the satisfaction of the city acting reasonably that they don't need either the exemption form or a reference plan in order to essentially charge, lease, or convey the severed lot under the Land Titles Act. So what we've done with the wording is just give a bit more time to sort out which of those three is most appropriate. This is a unique situation to have properties inadvertently merge on title and have separate pins. So we just hope this satisfies the applicant's needs as well as the land registry office.
Okay, is there anyone else to speak to this application? Do you know if anyone else? Go ahead.
Can you hear me? It's Paul Robinson. I'm agent for the owner.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you to the committee for the opportunity to speak to the application. Appearing for the owner, who right now is on an ambulance call, so she apologizes for not appearing as well. So the planner has already advised you that really what we're trying to do is reestablish a lot line as a result of an inadvertent merger. I would just like to take a moment to speak to some of the conditions. The first one, Ms. Baker's already alluded to, is the requirement for a reference plan, and it's our position that since these two lots still exist as far as the land registry office is concerned, both have pins, they're both whole parcels as far as the land registry office is concerned. Under Section 150 of the Planning Act, that the committee has the authority and discretion to allow for the consent to be issued without the requirement for a reference plan to be deposited. Since there's no proposed changes to the existing lot lines or location of existing structures or buildings, all that we're seeking is planning consent for relief of part lot control so the sale can go through. A sale, by the way, that's currently exists, and we've just got an extension on the closing date awaiting consent. So the fact that none of these changes are proposed to the existing lot lines or buildings, I again request that the committee consider waiving the requirement for a designer to sign off on the distance from the lot line of existing buildings. Quite frankly, that's not going to change one way or the other. Those buildings have been there for 100 years. So if you would at least give some consideration to that. There's also a condition for a Bell easement. I would suggest that Bell's access to the property today is no different than it would be after a consent. They're welcome to access the property, and requiring the Bell easement will effectively require the deposit of a reference plan, which, as I've already said, isn't required under the Planning Act. And quite frankly, if Bell wants an easement, they can have one. That should be up to them to acquire and pay for, since they're the beneficiaries of the easement. We've applied for a minor variance for the frontage. Again, it seems overly prescriptive to require that, again, since we are talking about a very minor 37 feet versus 39 minimum. And again, we're not changing lot lines, we're not changing locations of buildings, the exact same property as it was last week. However, we've applied for it. I would again request, sort of in summary, I would request that the committee waive these conditions. There's no change to either lot. And in view of the pending sale of the property, I'd urge the committee to approve it without any conditions.
Okay, anyone else or any members of the committee wish to speak, have questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Black.
Question to the agent. In other words, what you're asking us to do is disregard 1 through 7 and right down to 8. Is that right from 1 to 8? Is that correct? On the recommendations?
Yes.
Okay. In other words, what you're really doing is cleaning up the property here so you can sell the property.
Correct. We're trying to overcome a technicality of the Planning Act that prevents us from selling a part lot.
A part lot that actually exists, that has been taxed
Correct.
for 2 lots.
It's a whole. Correct. And is today still too.
Yeah. So you're not changing any buildings, you're not changing anything. So if I would make a recommendation that we forego the recommendations, other than we do need a minor variance in regards to the land. Is that not correct?
Ms. Baker, do you want to respond?
Yes, so through the chair, we do require the variance, and I should have mentioned, I apologize, that in fact they have applied for the variance, which is condition number 3, so that will be on the next Committee of Adjustment agenda. I would suggest that you keep condition number 1, that's the lapsing of the consent within 1 year. And the second is satisfactory arrangement of payment of municipal property taxes. That's a standard consent condition. I might suggest that one remain. And maybe just some clarity on number 7. It is not staff's intent to impose a reference plan. Essentially, given the tight time getting on to the meeting today at 3 p.m., I couldn't get a satisfactory conclusion with the city solicitor. So we provided the wording that if she can just be given a little bit more time to look at it, then her review of the information from the applicant may just satisfy that condition. So it's not that a reference plan is required. We've tried to give the ORs to hopefully satisfactorily resolve that between the city solicitor and the applicant. And I would keep condition 8 because that's just a final clearance. That's just that you've satisfied all other conditions. It doesn't necessarily require anything further. And I would leave the Bell comment to Bell. That was a comment that we received from them through the circulation.
Okay, so my question then would be, I make this recommendation, we would keep 1 and 2 and 7. Now, 7, is that important to do a whole site plan and drawing for these properties?
Through the chair, number 7 isn't, it actually isn't a site plan. It's just confirming, because we couldn't get a resolution with the land registry office and the city solicitor in time for the call today. This is to give the flexibility that hopefully in the next day or 2 we can sort this out and they don't need a reference plan. So the condition has been written that they either need to provide a reference plan or an exemption form, which is a form at the registry office, or just get confirmation from the city solicitor that the information they've submitted to date already is sufficient and they can go ahead and the condition is cleared. So we've given the flexibility that hopefully in the next few days we can have this resolved. And you know, the hope is not to require a reference plan. I just don't have the final sign off from the city solicitor.
But if we go to number 7, is this going to hold up the sale of the property? That's my question to the agent.
The holdup currently will be the minor variance application, to be quite honest.
Okay. And that's coming forward at our next meeting, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if that's the case, then
Just before make a
I
recommendation.
make the motion, I'll let somebody else speak.
Yeah. Is there any other committee members that have questions of the applicant?
Just one quick comment.
Yes, go ahead, Jerry.
So with all of this that's going on, it's basically reestablishing 2 separate properties, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, my recommendation is going to be that the planning, with the planning staff, this makes good sense for the property to reestablish the boundary lines. I don't know whether we had public input, did we?
Through the chair, there was no public input.
Okay, there was no public input, and that my recommendation is that we keep item 1, item 2, and item 7. And you would like item 8 and number 8 too. So 1, 2, 7, and 8. Those conditions only.
And through the chair, number 3 is the variance.
So can we move that to variance today?
Through the chair, the variance wasn't submitted in time to be included in the notice or given circulation under the Planning Act.
Okay. So therefore we have to include 3 then.
Through the chair, that would be my recommendation.
Okay, I will include 1, 2, 3, 7, and 8. That's my motion.
Is there a seconder?
I'll second that.
Jerry, second. Any further discussion on the application?
Thank you to the committee.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, consent application is approved. Okay. And I just asked the committee members just to hang on for a couple of minutes for further discussion on a couple of things. Savannah, Ms. Baker, anything do we need to address, or is the meeting adjourned?
The meeting is adjourned. I was just going to ask if it's okay to leave or if you needed me to stay on. But appreciate all your help today and hope everybody has a nice day.
Okay.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you. Bye.